You also said dissociated. Can you explain what dissociation is?
So my understanding of it is, I heard someone describe like the nature of trauma is cutting off. Like, say we're experiencing something and it's difficult or traumatic, and especially when we're younger, but also when, as adults, we don't have the capacity to regulate that, and if our fight or flight system is overwhelmed and we're experiencing something really difficult, we dissociate, which kind of like a part of us, a part of our awareness in a sense, holds that, and kind of we separate from a part of ourselves or part of our awareness. This is kind of getting into a bit of like IFS, internal family systems therapy way of thinking about things, which is where my understanding of dissociation comes from. That like our mind, we think of our mind, maybe I'm sidetracking a bit here, but we think of our mind.
Oh, it's good.
Yeah. We think of, they describe it as the mono-mind model, that we have this self, this sense of self. You're Robert, I'm Annie. We have one mind with these thoughts and emotions and feelings that appear in it. In IFS, they have the idea model that our minds are multiple, that we have like multiple kind of inner beings within us, seats of awareness, and they all talk to each other and relate to each other. And this is like actually the nature of the mind, they say, like it's not pathological. So we have these parts, and they conceive of it as a system of like protector parts and wounded parts. And when parts of us are present, especially when we're younger, say, that get wounded and get hurt, we dissociate from that, and protector parts kind of keep that experience, those memories, those feelings, those emotions locked away. Then we can, maybe feel like we don't have a connection to our younger self, or not having memories from being younger, maybe like what I'm describing a bit, where I feel like I can't connect to my younger self because lots of those parts are kind of dissociated from me. But I'm aware there's also there's like dissociation that people experience where they feel like it's a very like in the moment experience where they feel like they've left their body and they're not present. Yeah, maybe that's more commonly actually how people talk about dissociation. Like I've not, I have experienced it, not to the extreme of some people I know who experience it where they feel like they're really outside of their body, they're not present. It's like they're kind of watching themselves. Again, which is maybe relates to what I was saying, is it's some kind of protective mechanism where parts of you leave, or parts of you are kind of taking over to protect yourself from this overwhelm you're experiencing. So that's maybe a long-winded of saying, some kind of like separation or split in your awareness and leaving the body and these kind of things.
I also experience that from time to time, also in different kind of relationships for me. Like it appears in work relationships as well as in friendships or closer relationships. So the closer the relationship, the more intense it gets. But for me, it feels like, for example, when someone puts expectations out there on me, I take responsibility on myself. And as a child, I learned that I have to take responsibility of the mood of my caretakers, of my mother, for example. And when I'm not acting properly and stabilizing her mood, then I fall into this kind of powerlessness state, and that state of, I don't know, maybe even fearing of dying as a child, because I had to control her mood in that scenario. So this is where I feel that I'm like a bit of outside of my body, because this kind of feeling of powerlessness and panic completely fills me up. So for example, at work, when I feel, there's high pressure, there's high expectations, I'm like, I'm gonna die. Okay, I'm out there. Or in a relationship, right? I feel like this sensation of, it's interesting, like the emotion involved with it is like panic or powerlessness. Just not as crazy or intense, but just a tiny bit. There's a tiny bit of background panic then. And I think this is where I also dissociate. like not completely losing myself and losing control, but still dissociating a bit, and where you can really see that there are two parts. Like I can sense that these are like two parts. What would you say, like, I know it's also like probably related to the strong perception of emotion or the inner world here as a highly sensitive person. What do you say, like, how do you address this kind of dissociated part? Like what would you do with it? Is there something that you should do, that you could do, or is it healing by itself? What would you think?
Yeah, I really related with what you were saying. I was experiencing that yesterday, actually. It was my first day back at work after a week off, and then like feeling that overwhelm with all the tasks to do, not knowing where to start, and powerlessness. That word, like, I think that really captured how I was feeling yesterday. I went into like a frozen state.
Paralyzed even.
Yeah. It's like fight, flight, fawn, freeze. I get in that freeze state often when I'm overwhelmed with sensory things or work things or relationship things.
So that's really like technically fear of dying then.
Yeah, in some part of you, yeah, like you said, it goes back to that childhood where, those parts of us that carry overwhelm and panic, maybe young parts back then, we were dependent on caregivers. For me, like, it didn't feel like yesterday it was connected to that fear of dying. I guess maybe ultimately that's the fear underneath all fears, so you can always trace it back to that.
Probably. Yeah.
If I'd followed the thought train far enough, like, I'm not going to be able to do work, I'm going to have to quit my PhD, I'm going to have no money, I'm not going to be able to survive, it goes back there. And then also, like you're describing, on a more like kind of instinctive inner child level as well. For me, I found what's helpful is really just trying to start exactly where I am, like meeting myself and being with myself exactly where I am, as I am. So that being able to pause and then being aware of where you're at, like, naming it, like, okay, I'm dissociated or feel frozen. So I was telling myself yesterday, like, okay, frozen, this is how it feels to feel frozen. And I think we had this conversation before, like when we were learning about mindfulness and stuff, and we were like, why isn't awareness enough? Like, feels like I'm more aware of my emotions and my inner state, but sometimes that doesn't feel like enough. And I feel like for me, learning that as well as being aware and naming my inner life, it's then the wise response, like the compassionate response. It's the allowing of that to be as it is. Because for me, there's always often been that subtle attitude of, I shouldn't be like this, I don't want to be frozen, I don't want to be dissociated, I should be doing my work, I should be in my body, I should be like this. So noticing and really being like, okay, this is how it is right now, and just allowing it to be, seeing that this part has a wisdom, has a message. It's feeling overwhelmed, it's trying to tell me something that I need to pause, or I need to nourish myself, I need to resource, I need to ground. Just allowing that dissociation to be there in a way. And sometimes when I do that, as I start to kind of allow it and bring this attitude of welcoming the dissociation, things start to move and shift a bit. And I might then feel myself coming back to my body a bit more, or I might just unfreeze a little bit where I can be like, okay, let's go outside, or let's do some yoga. Yeah, just unfreezing, thawing a little bit enough that I can do something.